Welcome everybody to the Christmas 2025 edition of Virginia Wine and Song, the Virginia YouTube channel, where I normally talk about a Virginia wine and winery, and I talk about an album, an underrated album from a well-known artist. But every now and then I do kind of go off the rails and talk about something else, which is, because it's Christmas, I'm going to talk about film, which I also like talking about on this channel. I was originally going to do a countdown of my top 10 Christmas movies, but since I'm a physical media person, I'm really into physical media. I was looking at my collection of DVDs and Blu-rays, and I don't really have a lot of Christmas movies. Not enough to do a top 10 list, if you can believe that. So I decided to switch gears and do another top 10, and I want to go through my favorite films by who I believe it was one of the greatest directors of all time, and that director is Stanley Kubrick, who actually made a Christmas movie, which I will talk about in this countdown, so there's a little bit of a correlation there. But Stanley Kubrick made only 13 films in his life. He only made 13, but most of those films, at least 11 of those 13 films, are bona fide classics. Definitely 10, but I would say even 11 of them are bona fide classics. So I'm going to be talking about a top 10 list of what I consider to be my top 10 favorite Stanley Kubrick films, and everybody's got their own list. If you're familiar with film, you'll have your own list as well. I am going to have a bonus. I'm going to give you an honorable mention, a number 11 pick, because it was really hard to pin down 10. So I have 10 plus one honorable mention. So let's go right into it, because I want to be kind of brief and go through these pretty quickly, because you can talk for hours about this director. If you're a film lover, even a casual film fan, you're probably familiar with Stanley Kubrick. So anyway, he made 13 films. I'll be talking about 11 of them here. So starting with the honorable mention, number 11, I'm going to pick this movie mainly because I don't consider this to be a true Stanley Kubrick movie. This is Spartacus, and yes, he did direct this film, but anybody with a knowledge of Stanley Kubrick's his career will know that this was his first big budget epic, and that was, he was hired by Kirk Douglas to make this film. Kirk Douglas was the producer, and also Kirk Douglas was sort of like the ad hoc director. He took over the directing reins and many times during the shooting of this film, and he was taking a lot of the creative control away from the director, who was really Stanley Kubrick. So there were certain things that Kirk wanted directed his own way. He had his own ideas, and he basically overruled Stanley Kubrick. And that was the one and only time that ever happened to Kubrick in his career. He always had creative control on all of his other films, including the ones before this. But this one, because it was a big budget, and Kirk Douglas, it was his money, most of his money, and his investors' money. Most of the film was under his control. So, that said, this is still a good movie. I put it as the honorable mention. It's number 11. It's not a movie I fire up very often. It's a long film. It's 3 hours and 16 minutes long. It's pretty long. These types of epic movies back in the 60s were pretty long. Look at Lawrence of Arabia and Ben-Hur and all these real, epic movies that had a historical backdrop, and there was kind of religion was involved, although there was no religion in this film. As actor Peter Ustinov once said, this is a film about Christianity without Christ. So kind of interesting take on it. And it also, I think, in many ways was the forerunner to Gladiator, which came out, of course, in 2000 with Russell Crowe. This was the original type of movie like that, Gladiator movie. So Spartacus, a good film. It's good to watch, especially if you have a large screen TV. It's a good thing to watch on a large screen. Really good effects. This is a good remastering. They actually re-released this film in the 1990s. With a couple of edited scenes. There were some scenes that were removed from the original release of this, when this movie was first released in 1960. Yeah, it was released in 1960. And there was a scene in a bathtub that was considered to be a little bit kind of risque. Two men actually involved in the bathtub. and they removed that from the 1960 version, but it was reinserted for the 1990s remaster and re-release. So anyway, Spartacus, good film, not in my top 10. I put it at number 11. So still I watch it on occasion, but not as much as I watch the other films. So number 10, the true top 10 is now going to start with a film that that was released shortly after, well, a couple of years after, 2 years after Spartacus. Spartacus came out in 1960. Lolita came out in 1962. And this is a movie that Kubrick, once again, had full creative control on. He adapted the book, which of course the book was considered to be pretty scandalous. In fact, even today, especially now, with with a lot of Puritans in charge of our government, the book Lolita has been removed from a lot of high school and college libraries. I actually read Lolita when I was in college, and the English class that I took, the literature class that I took at the time, also screened the movie. So we watched the movie after we all read the book. So it really was kind of an interesting experience. And this is not another movie that I don't really watch very often. It's pretty dark. It's kind of a bleak film, but it's got great performances in it. I think the best thing about this movie are the performances. James Mason as the obsessed Humperdinck. That was his name, I think. I had, like I said, I haven't read the book since college, but Humperdinck, I think was his name. Charlotte was his wife. He marries Charlotte, who's played by Shelley Winters. Charlotte is the mother of Lolita, and the only reason why he marries Charlotte is so he can be closer to Lolita. So it's pretty risque, especially for 1962. And I think the film was actually condemned by the Catholic Board of Films. There was a group out there made up of Catholic Church members who would condemn films if they thought the films were inappropriate for a wide release, and they condemned this. But I think the film, did rather well in New York and Hollywood, and there was usually those coastal areas that these types of movies do better in than the Heartland. I don't think this movie played in the Heartland. If it did play, it didn't play for very long. So this is 1962. It's got Sue Leon as Lolita. She's very good at that. She's been in other movies, but this is the only movie I think I've ever seen her in. Peter Sellers, he's in this film. He's pretty much playing himself. He's a weird character in this. Peter Sellers, he had a penchant for playing really out there and comedic, very, very broadly funny characters. In this film, he's not really that funny. He's just weird. He plays Claire Quilty, who's the original suitor of Lolita in the film. Very involved movie, and I remember when I saw it when I was in college, it followed the book very closely because we had just read the book, and I think it followed it pretty well. And they remade this movie in the 90s. It was remade by Adrian Lyne. Adrian Lyne was the director who made Fatal Attraction, and Jacob's Ladder and a couple other movies. He remade Lolita in, I think, 1997, I think, with Jeremy Irons. I never saw that. I'm sure they probably upped the ante a little bit with what they could get away with. They couldn't really get away with that in 1962, but they probably could get away with it in 1997. Never saw that. Anyway, Lolita's number 10. And before I continue, now that I'm going to dive into the next 9 films, every single movie from here on out on this list by Kubrick, I consider to be a masterpiece. Any of these movies I could watch anytime. These others two I just mentioned, Spartacus and Lolita, I don't have a craving to watch these as often because they're pretty heavy. And Lolita is also very long. This is another really long film. Let me see how long it is. I remember it being long. I don't think it has the time on it. Okay, it's really not that long. 153 minutes. That's still pretty long though. 153 minutes. So these are not movies I fire up very often. But these next 9 films I do. So without further ado, let's go into what I consider to be the Brilliant 9 by Stanley Kubrick. This is The Killing. This is a film, a heist film that he made. This was actually his, this was his third film. He made 2 other films that were really, really ultra low budget. This was his film that had a bigger budget. It was still pretty low budget, but they were just getting started. It was Stanley Kubrick and his partner James Harris, who is the producer, their company was just getting off the ground, and they decided to adapt this book that was based on the robbery of a racetrack in California. And this film is shown from the perspective of different characters and different events. So it's one of the first films, I think, that came out. This movie came out in 1956. 1956, where you saw a lot of the same sequences, but from different perspectives. And it may have been done before that, but Stanley Kubrick really mastered that. And this film really influenced a lot of future directors, including Quentin Tarantino and Michael Mann, and a lot of contemporary directors really were inspired by this film. Sterling Hayden is he's the ringleader of this grab of, they're all kind of misfits who he puts together to rob this racetrack. And he plans a really elaborate heist. I mean, he puts every single detail he has covered, but of course things go unexpected, things go awry, and it does not have a good ending for this group of would-be thieves. So The Killing, really great. It's got some great performances, not only by Sterling Hayden, but also by other actors. The actor who plays a lot of Weasley characters, his name was Alicia Cook Jr. He's in this film. It's also got Mary Windsor. A little bit of a footnote, if you're familiar with Salem's Lot, the movie that was based on a Stephen King novel. The made-for-TV version of Salem's Lot that came out, which was on TV actually in 1979. That movie actually featured Mary Windsor and Alicia Cook Jr. It was sort of a reunion, just a little bit. I just rewatched Salem's Lot recently, and I noticed that. So you have to be a real diehard film nerd to know that. So great film. Timothy Carey, he was a really weirdo actor. He actually worked with Stanley Kubrick in a couple of films. He also worked with John Cassavetes in a couple of films. Really quirky, strange. He always either played really pathetic losers, or he played psychos. In this film, he's a psycho. So The Killing, I can't recommend it enough. I consider it to be, it's a short film. It's 84 minutes. It's one of his shortest films. If you really want to get a really quick shot of the brilliance of Stanley Kubrick early in his career, this is a good one to watch. 84 minutes. Now, this is a Criterion Collection copy of The Killing. And there is actually another movie on here called Killer's Kiss. And Killer's Kiss was the film that he made right before The Killing. And that's a bonus movie that's on this as well. This Killer's Kiss was his second film, actually his third film. He made a real cheap student film. He was never a student. That's the other thing. This guy Stanley Kubrick dropped out of college. I don't think he went to college. So he wasn't really formally educated. He didn't go to film school. He was a photographer. He was a photographer for Look magazine, which was at the time Look and Life magazine were the two competing photography magazines that were big in the 50s and 60s. And he was a photographer for Look magazine, so he already had established his reputation of being a master of the visual cinema, or visual arts, I should say. So he made a couple of cheapy films, but then he made Killer's Kiss, which is on this film as a bonus attraction. I didn't include Killer's Kiss in this countdown because it's not very well known. Unless you have this Criterion, you may have never seen it. It's only like an hour long. It's even shorter than The Killing. Killer's Kiss. It's a strange little movie about two neighbors who get involved. One of the neighbors is a boxer, and the other neighbor lives across the courtyard. It's got a kind of a Hitchcockian thing going on. Killer's Kiss is a very unique, the way it plays with light. It's almost like a German expressionist movie. I think Killer's Kiss is a good movie as well. But The Killing is the highlight of this Criterion Collection copy. So, good movie. This is number 9. Okay, so now we're moving on to number 8. Number 8, Full Metal Jacket. Again, I have to say, any of these movies I could put in and watch anytime. Even if I just watched the movie a couple of months ago, I could put it in again. Because you rediscover, or discover, I should say, you discover so many new things, and you also rediscover certain things that, in a different way. It's hard to explain, especially if you've been watching Stanley Kubrick films for decades, as I have been. I started watching his films in the 80s, and every time I plug any of his movies in, I see something new. And Full Metal Jacket is no exception. This is an interesting film. It's divided into 2 parts. The first part is the training at Paris Island in South Carolina. These Vietnam Marines, they're getting ready to be shipped off to Vietnam. The second half of the movie takes place in Vietnam. And the film was released a couple of months after Platoon. So, but it wasn't really overshadowed. I think Full Metal Jacket did pretty well. It didn't do great at the box office. It didn't do as well as Platoon did. I think the reason why is because Platoon was still fresh in people's memory. Full Metal Jacket came out, I think, about 4 months after Platoon did. And I think this is the better film. I mean, Platoon, I saw Platoon once, and that was enough. It's sort of like The Deer Hunter and Apocalypse Now. You see The Deer Hunter once, and that's enough. But Apocalypse Now, which came out the following year, in 1979, you could watch Apocalypse Now over and over and over again. The same analogy holds true, I think, with Platoon and Full Metal Jacket. Full Metal Jacket, it's got the quintessential Kubrick shots in there. Those quick zoom in shots that he likes to do, where he puts the camera up and all of a sudden he zooms in on something. So in this film, and you could freeze your DVD or Blu-ray player on anything, and you see a really interesting shot, whether it's the Paris Island sequences or the sequences in the barracks where Private Pyle is having his breakdown, even the bathroom where a lot of activity takes place in the barracks bathroom, where all of the urinals are gleaming. They're so beautifully clean. It's like only Kubrick could do something like that. So anyway, this is a good one, Full Metal Jacket. It's a downer, no question about it. It is about Vietnam. It's not exactly a happy film, but it is beautifully shot. And it's actually his second to last film that he made. He made this in 1987. He didn't make a lot of films, like I said, and the movies he did make, they were really, at least later in his career, they were really spaced apart by several years. So this was 1987, his second to last film. Okay, so we're moving on. This is another film with Peter Sellers, Dr. Strangelove. A lot of people consider this to be one of the funniest movies of all time. I think now, every couple of years, every 15 or 20 years or so, there's a lot of instability throughout the world and a lot of concern about nuclear weapons being used. And I think we're now in that era again in 2025. I think, people who are thinking about the future of not only our country but our planet are probably worrying about what's going to happen, because we've got a lot of crazy things happening throughout the world. I won't get into politics on this, but watching this movie now, you kind of watch it with a little bit of trepidation, because it's almost like, could this really happen here? We have people like General Jack D. Ripper, who's the crazy one in this, the general who goes crazy and tries to provoke a war. We've got a couple of people like that in the current administration right now in the United States. We got a couple of Jack D. Rippers, so it's scary. And this movie came out in 1964. So well after the Cuban, not too long after the Cuban Missile Crisis. So people were on edge about nuclear weapons. They were on edge about the bomb and the use of the bomb, the dropping of the bomb. And this movie is a parody of it all. It's a black comedy. It makes fun of all of that. It makes fun about it. It's really how crazy is all of this? This is insane. If Stanley Kubrick wanted to make this movie straight, I don't know how he could do that. He probably could have turned it into a real thriller if he wanted to. A real straight thriller, but he decided to make it a black comedy, and it is a dark comedy. George C. Scott is in this film. He plays the main guy, and he doesn't want everybody to see the big board. You know what I'm talking about if you've seen this film. They're talking about what to do about General Jack D. Ripper. Peter Sellers plays 3 characters. He plays the president. He's really kind of serious, but he's still kind of got some really sarcastic jabs at the president. Then he plays General Jack D. Ripper's assistant, who's this guy that has a gammy leg. He's got a fake leg. And then he also plays Dr. Strangelove, What more can be said about that? 3 roles for Peter Sellers. So this is a comedy classic for sure. So moving on. Now we're at the Christmas movie. This is Stanley Kubrick's Christmas movie. This is also his last movie he made, Eyes Wide Shut. It came out in 1999. It was released about 4 or 5 months after he died. It's a dark film. It's about the state of marriage. and what makes a marriage work, and what happens when people who are involved in a marriage start thinking about being with other people, whether it's through fantasies or whether it's through some really reckless act. And a lot of this film, you have to question yourself whether what's happening to these characters is real, or whether it's in their imagination. It's a kind of a cerebral film. It was marketed as a thriller. It's not really a thriller. It's got elements of a thriller in it, but it's got beautiful set design in it. It's supposed to take place in New York City, but it doesn't really look like New York. It looks like a stage almost. It doesn't look like New York City, but it's supposed to be New York City. So the whole movie is almost like it plays with you. It plays with your imagination. Don't expect a straight thriller, because it's not. Tom Cruise, of course, he plays the lead. He's the doctor, and Nicole Kidman, and they were married at the time when they made this film. It's just there's a Christmas tree. A lot of sequences. There are not many sets in this film. This film is, I don't want to call it stagey, but like I said, almost like dreamlike. And a lot of the different sets have a Christmas tree featured in different colors. Like there's a white Christmas tree in a scene, there's a green one, there's a blue one. They have different colored lights. There are Christmas lights hanging all over people's windows. So it's got a Christmas vibe for sure. So Eyes Wide Shut, I don't really want to talk too much about the plot, because you need to experience it at least once. And I have it really pretty high up in my list, because I consider it to be it's a masterpiece. I think it's a great film. So this is not a Criterion copy, by the way. They just got this on Criterion a couple of weeks ago. This is a Blu-ray copy that I have. Okay, so Eyes Wide Shut. Okay, now we're up to another controversial film. A lot of his films were controversial, that's for sure. This is A Clockwork Orange. This was so controversial that was banned. It was banned in the UK for about 20 years, maybe 15 or 20 years. You couldn't see it. They filmed it in the UK, and that's where Stanley Kubrick was living at the time, but they couldn't show it in the UK. Well, I think they did show it for a few weeks, but then there were so many riots and so much violence that a lot of copycat killings were happening. So the UK decided to pull it from the theaters, and it was banned in that country, like I said, for at least 15 or 20 years. But it was always available in the US, and it was always available in the original format. It has never been, they never put out a director's cut. This was always the original version. And the original version was rated X when it first came out into the theaters in the US. It was later reduced to an R, and a lot of people thought, oh, he must have taken out some material to make it an R. No, he didn't. I think he said he did, because Stanley Kubrick was always sort of like a kind of a trickster in a way, but he was not going to take anything out of this movie, and he just said he did, and then they gave him an R based on his say, but it's the same movie. So anyway, this is a very this is a movie that, you have to, I don't want to say it's over the top violence. It is pretty over the top for the time, especially. It came out in 1971, I think. 1971, yeah, it was pretty shocking probably when it came out. Nowadays, it's pretty tame, but the sexual violence in it and the scenes involving rape are still pretty graphic. And the fact that you really like the main character played by Malcolm McDowell, he's a rapist, and he's a murderer, and he's a thief, and he's a two-bit, he's a thug basically. But he narrates the film, and his narration is so witty, you can't help but kind of like him in a way. So it kind of takes you into a dark place by watching this film. It's a lot has been said about A Clockwork Orange through the years, so I don't really need to get into it further. But it's high up on my list for sure. Okay, now we're getting down to the last four. The last four, what I consider to be my favorite Stanley Kubrick films. Number 4 is Paths of Glory, and again, this could easily be number 2 or number 3 or 1. Made by any other director, it probably would be number 1, but it's Stanley Kubrick. He's got so many masterpieces. This movie is a classic. This is a Criterion copy. It's a classic of a hypocrisy in the high military. It deals with soldiers being unjustly tried for cowardice just because they couldn't take the anthill. It was impossible, and the higher officers thought that they were weaklings and they were cowards and losers. And again, another movie that resonates a little bit now, considering what's happening in the U.S. and what's happened to our Department of Defense or Department of War. I said there was not going to be any politics in here, but sorry. We now have a Department of War, not a Department of Defense in the U.S. And this movie would probably, I could see a lot of people who are in the administration who probably would be those higher in commands who would tell these soldiers to go into the line of fire and try to take a hill or a mountain that's impossible to take. And if they don't take it, then they get tried for cowardice and they get shot by a firing squad. You know, that's and Kirk Douglas is in this film. This was a film that he befriended. He became close with Stanley Kubrick, and that led to their collaboration with Spartacus. But this is Paths of Glory, and this came out in 1957, several years before they started making Spartacus. And it's a boohooer also. The sequence at the end of this film, it is just, it's hard to watch this sequence without feeling some really strange emotions, whether it's sadness or just sorrow or depression or just utter despair. I mean, it's hard to describe. You've got to see this film. This film is brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Okay, Paths of Glory. Now we're up to the top 3. Okay, here we go. This is The Shining. This is his epic horror film. Has nothing to do with the book by Stephen King. Stephen King, of course, hated this film because it strayed so far from the book. I thought it improved on the book. The book I thought had a lot of stuff in it that I thought was silly, like, you know, animals and hedges coming to life and weird stuff that they ended up doing in the made-for-TV version of The Shining that they put out in 1997. That had hedges coming to life and all that. That's stupid. I mean, it's just silly. Stanley Kubrick knew better than to put a hedge that comes to life in his version of The Shining. He took the book as an inspiration. He took the location, that hotel, that foreboding hotel that's that's isolated by a major blizzard. He took that setting and the ghostly happenings that happened in the hotel and the mental state of Jack Torrance in this. Those were his starting points, and he crafted this beautifully shot film. It's one of the most beautiful films ever made. I think most of Stanley Kubrick movies are beautiful, all of them, even the horror films, even The Clockwork Orange. I mean, again, his background as a photographer for Look magazine, it all came out in his cinematography. And this is a great movie to watch when you have a blizzard. You know, strangely enough, the movie came out in the summer. I remember when it came out. I didn't see it in the theater. I was too young to see it in the theater. But I remember my parents went to go see it, and it was in the middle of the summer. And I just thought that was weird because I saw the ads on TV and I knew it took place in the wintertime. So they put it out in the summer for whatever reason. That must have been something. Seeing a movie in the middle of the summer and then coming out, that was this kind of, you know, winter setting. But anyway, this is a film that, you know, you could even watch it without the TV on. You could have just the soundtrack on. The soundtrack is enough to scare you. That shows you how creepy this film is when the soundtrack without any visuals is scary, to give you nightmares, I think. I mean, the soundtrack in this movie is really, really foreboding, and it's almost like the sounds of hell. There's no better way to put it. So this is a classic for sure. One of the scariest films I think ever made, if not the scariest. Okay, but there's still 2 Stanley Kubrick movies that I prefer more. So here's number 2. Here's another Criterion copy. This is Barry Lyndon. This came out in 1975. It was an absolute failure when it came out in the theater. I remember it in the theater. Again, I was too young when it came out, but I remember my parents loved it. My parents loved it so much they bought the soundtrack. My parents were huge classical music fans. And I remember hearing the soundtrack. They played it all the time. And of course, the soundtrack was just classical pieces by Mozart and Vivaldi and Bach and Schubert and probably all the biggies that you know from the classical musical era were featured in this on the soundtrack. And so I remember when they saw it, and I don't think it did very well at the theater. I think it did very well at the Oscars. I think it got nominated for a bunch of Oscars, but it didn't break any box office records. Okay. Once again, I get so animated when I start talking about things like this that I talk too fast. But anyway, and also I'm worried that the battery of my camera is going to die down because it doesn't last very long. So I gotta move fast. Anyway, Barry Lyndon. This is a film where you can truly freeze frame any scene in the film, any scene at all. And this movie is 185 minutes long. It's a long movie. Just take your high definition Blu-ray player or even DVD player and click pause, and you'll have a beautiful painting or a beautiful piece of photography that you can frame even. That's just how intimate this movie is. I mean, it's a historical drama for sure. and it's got sweeping sequences of battles and all this, really lush cinematography. He filmed everything by candlelight. All the interior scenes were filmed with candlelight. So, and he used special lenses that were from NASA, for filming the candlelight scenes. So, this movie is not only is it an emotionally jarring film. You're taking on this long journey with this Barry Lyndon character, played by Ryan O'Neal. He's an opportunist. He's not a nice guy at all, and he climbs the ladder of wealth and society, and then of course he crashes at the end, and rightly so. It's a movie that, like I said, I could watch this movie every week and never get tired of it. Plus, another case of narration. The narration in this is done so wittily. It's almost like a narrator from, Alistair Cook from Masterpiece Theater. It's not him, but it sounds somebody like him who's narrating this. And he's narrating it with a really wry sense of humor. And he kind of tells you what's happening. He tells you what's going to happen before you even see it, which I thought was really interesting. You have an idea what's going to happen to these characters because the narrator's kind of giving you clues what's going to happen. It's just a beautiful movie. I mean, I almost chose it as my number one Kubrick pick. That's how good this movie is. I think it's been rediscovered through the years. I think because of word of mouth, people, especially if you can see it on a big screen. I've never seen this in the theater. I wish I could see it in the theater, but I don't think it's not profitable enough to show it in the theater. They can get away with showing The Shining in the theater again, or Full Metal Jacket probably, or even Dr. Strangelove, but they can't really show this. This is not really profitable. They should. They really should. Okay, so this is number 2, Barry Lyndon. That leaves number 1. I think anybody who knows anything about Kubrick probably knows the movie I'm going to pick now because I haven't mentioned it yet. We're talking about the inspiration for so many things. The movie that inspired, a future generation of science fiction filmmakers, including Star Wars. And this movie inspired Steven Spielberg, it inspired George Lucas, it inspired Martin Scorsese, it inspired Brian De Palma, it inspired even Woody Allen. This movie was an inspiration for everything, and it's for many, many filmmakers. And it's, strangely enough, it's not really, it's not a, well, my cat has decided to join us here, which is pretty fitting because Stanley Kubrick was a well-known cat lover. He loved cats. So that's kind of fitting. But anyway, 2001, it's not your typical movie. It doesn't have what I would consider to be a standard Hollywood plot. It's really about pondering okay, you're blocking the camera. Pondering of life and our existence, and the pondering of God and Jesus, or whatever your belief is. It's not really a religious movie per se, but it's a spiritual movie. And it really is. I think really what it is about the dawn and the death of man, the dawn and death of mankind. That's one interpretation. There's so many different interpretations you can have when you watch this film. And the monolith. What does that monolith mean? It shows up. What does that mean? I mean, what you love about Stanley Kubrick is many of his movies have a lot of riddles in them. They have a lot of riddles, and not one movie has more riddles than this. This is another movie with a lot of classical music. He was really into classical music scores. 2001. I'm saying probably the least amount of stuff about this movie because everybody knows it. Even if you've never seen the movie, you certainly heard of 2001. And of course, the year 2001 has come and gone. The year 2001, we're in 2025 now. So this year, 24 years ago, this movie, this year happened 24 years ago. Think about that. When this movie came out in 1968, 2001, people were thinking, oh my God, that sounds like the Jetsons. I mean, that sounds like a long, long way away. Now it's now it's kind of a long time ago, 24 years. So we're not quite here. I mean, there's actually an image of a rocket ship with a Pan Am logo on it, which is amusing because Pan Am, by the year 2001, in reality, Pan Am was no longer in existence. So that's kind of funny. So anyway, 2001, that was the number 1 pick for Stanley Kubrick films for me. Number 2 is Barry Lyndon. Number 3, The Shining. Number 4, Paths of Glory. This is a Criterion. Clockwork Orange is number 5. Yeah. Number 6 is Eyes Wide Shut. Number 7 is Doctor Strangelove. Number 8 is Full Metal Jacket. Number 9 is The Killing. Number 10, okay, I think I miscounted. Oh, no, right. The number 10 is Lolita. That's right. Spartacus is the runner-up. I forgot I had 11. 11 is Spartacus, the honorable mention. They're all great films. So do yourself a favor this Christmas. If you can find something streaming, I think the ones you're most likely to find streaming are probably, I want to say probably The Shining is streaming in a lot of places. Probably Full Metal Jacket. Doctor Strangelove is probably streaming, and I think Eyes Wide Shut is. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll see Paths of Glory, 2001. I don't know. Find out what's streaming. Do yourself a favor and watch yourself a Stanley Kubrick film before, well, he's already gone. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I know I was a little bit spastic at times, but hope you have a good Christmas, and thank you for watching.